those 6 elements of dignity are. Just run through the 6 elements and we'll unpackage them.
Absolutely. So the first is to honor the humanity of everybody that we deal with. And we'll talk more about
that's
it.
one.
The second one is to be authentic in all our interactions, and then parenthetically, but not by acting out. That's a super important part
2.
we can come back to. The third one is to make sure that everyone has a meaningful say. We
3.
could define later what that is. The fourth is to begin everything with positive beliefs. This goes back to the beliefs book. The fifth is to commit to helping everyone here get to greatness, or everyone we deal with. And then last but not least, the sixth, which I think is the hardest, is some meaningful application of equity.
Okay, let's unpackage these. Going back
Let's
to the
unpack
first.
them like Christmas.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to welcome back on the show for, I believe this is the 3rd time, co-founding partner of the Zingerman's community of business, Ari Weinzweig. My man, Ari, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I think I'm unstoppable because
sure
I'm with you.
Dude, you sure are.
When I'm with you, I'm unstoppable.
And this is almost surreal for me because when I first started this podcast, going back over 10 years ago, I discovered your book, A Lapsed Anarchist's Approach to Fill in the Blank. You have, I think, 4 out now or
There's
5?
four full books and then 8 pamphlets.
And I instantly resonated with your work, and I got to meet you at the Chefs Collaborative Summit in Denver, Colorado. I think that was going back 8 years ago, and I introduced myself to you. I got you on the show, and we've collaborated since then. Now we're, for the first time, recording in person.
I know.
In Zingerman's Roadhouse, man.
It's weird.
This is weird. This is exciting for me.
In a good way,
and frankly speaking, man, it's an honor.
Well, back at you.
To be able to share and echo your words and to highlight what you're doing for the restaurant industry. So I can't wait to dive into who you are and the latest pieces of work you got going on. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quarter mantra. What do you got for us?
Yeah, you asked me about a quote, and it's like, I have so many quotes that I was like, I don't even know which quote to use, but I'm going to use one from a guy named Ashanti Alston, who I've never met.
Was he an anarchist by any chance?
He was in the Black Panthers, and he learned about anarchism while incarcerated. He's not incarcerated now, but I really like reading his work and listening to his talks. But anyway, in one of his talks, he closed it out with, "You all can do this. You have the vision. You have the creativity. Do not allow anyone to lock that down." And that seemed ideal for unstoppable.
What is this, do you think, in that how does he use that? In what context? You have the capacity to do this.
Well, I think for me, it's about anything and that you put your mind to. And today we're going to talk about dignity, but it could be about cooking. It could be about cleaning. It could be about being a better parent. It could be really anything. I believe that if we, obviously there's talent. Like, I'm not Michael Jordan. I'm not, Yitzhak Perlman, whatever. But I think within our world, most of what we need to learn, we can learn and we can do. We just got to work at it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work. And people have been often led to believe it's just going to come. And I think, anybody who's been doing this, which is who you interview, but anybody who's been doing this for a while, we've all been through ups and downs. Even today, in a given day, there's 20 ups and downs,
right? And
moments where it's like, I'm never going to make it. Oh yeah, I got it. Oh no, this is terrible. I should have quit 20 years. And we're all over the place. So I like that quote, because whatever it is that we've put our mind to and we envision it, we can do it if we work at it.
And it's interesting too, because you talk about work. Anything if you just do the work, it's hard work, but you can do it. And I think there's almost this work adverse culture we're in right now, where we're trying to avoid work and streamline and automate things, and it's just like, I think it's important that we communicate that it's through doing hard things, through doing work, that you have to do the work to achieve the happiness. Yeah, and I think it's what's going through your mind as I share that.
Well, a couple things. So one is in Ashanti Alston's quote, he says, "You have the vision." So doing work without vision is exhausting. Because it's just repetition and it wears you down.
Yeah.
I mean, in our industry and probably every other industry, I just haven't worked in other ones, but I mean, every 5 minutes, it's like an employee that's struggling with this and the product that didn't show up and the product you bought for 20 years. And then the next week it came in and somebody, change something, but they didn't tell you. And but so when you have a vision of what you're going after, whether that's winning a WNBA championship, an NBA championship, opening a restaurant, it doesn't matter. I mean, when you can imagine this inspiring future, and not like as a flash, that'd be cool, but like something you really imagine, and we do the visioning process that we do, where you really write the vision. Then when you're dealing with the adversity, the drudgery, the ups and downs, it's in service of creating this other thing that we've committed to. So it's sort of like, if I run every day, but I don't run races. But people who run races, they all like imagine themselves getting over the finish line.
Right.
And when they want to quit partway through, which is normal, they don't, because it's like they've determined they're going to get there. And of course, if they're injured or whatever, they don't. So I like that he talks about the vision. Then you can do the work.
Right. And I want to point out that you and I collaborated on a workshop with visioning, because I know how important visioning is to you. Yeah. I think your work in A Lapsed Anarchist Approach to Building a Great Business, your first book, that's maybe not your first book, but the first in that series of books, I believe. You talk about visioning, and we did a whole workshop on that, and visioning is so powerful. But real quick, before we dive into today's subject, which is dignity, and it's your newest pamphlet, what is like your scope of work, real quick? Like, because you have 4 books out underneath the Lapsed Anarchists.
Yeah, my scope of writing work.
Yeah, I think it's important we draw attention to that.
Yeah. So there's those 4 books. So part 1 is Building a Great Business, which you just mentioned.
Yep.
Part 2 is on leadership, so being a better leader. Part 3 is managing ourselves. Part 4 is the biggest one by size. It's the power beliefs.
I'm leaving
in
with a copy of that today.
Okay. It's got a lot on beliefs, so not religion, sports, or politics per se, but more what we believe about work, like you're talking about now, what we believe about life, food, et cetera, and how our beliefs are shaping huge parts of our life, but we don't, most of us, including me, until I started that work 10 years ago, I had no clue. And that beliefs are not genetic. They can be changed, and that if we don't change them, we keep getting the same results. So there's those 4.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to your work, is that it sends you go into the granular stuff, like the step-by-step ways to do service, for example, or like how to create a vision or developing your core values. You get granular, but you're also a very big picture thinker, a very lofty thinker. And I think my mind is wired the same way. I think I see the world like big pictures and the values. You have a lot of value-based work, which I think is really important. The work you're doing is phenomenal.
Well, we're trying. Thank you. We mess up daily, but
but we all do. And I think you're vulnerable and you're transparent about those mess ups too, which is also a huge lesson. So when did you get away from the books and start writing the pamphlets? Like, what's the difference?
Well, I like the books too. They just take longer. We also have, so the books, those 4 books are written, they're made up mostly of single essays. So you can read the essay on its own. So I studied anarchism. I like anarchism. I write about the application of anarchism. So
why is it are you a lapsed anarchist?
I'm less and less lapsed, but
so
that's a whole nother conversation.
You're swinging back, the pendulum swinging.
I'm happy to talk about that too.
We can.
So in 1900, let's say, pamphlets were basically social media. So it was
what is a pamphlet today?
A pamphlet it's just what it is.
It's not a book. It is a book.
Smaller than a book. It's usually soft cover.
Okay.
And so they were like social media. So like for a nickel,
it's a reel.
You would buy this.
Yeah.
And you might pass it on to your friend, and it wasn't as serious as. Not in content, I mean, but like in terms of purchasing and storage and stuff.
Like, short form content.
Yeah, you could stick it in your pocket.
Yeah.
You could stick it in your suitcase, whatever.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
So I like that. So and so we were already selling the some of the essays we printed as pamphlets. So I always say it's like the single off the album. Like some people just want the servant leadership essay, and they don't want the whole of being a better leader.
Got it.
And then sometimes people buy the book for themselves, and then they buy 20 copies of the servant leadership pamphlet for their management team. So a la
carte.
Some people buy both. One woman was buying, I'm like, you realize that's in the book? And she's like, oh yeah, I know, but I leave the book at home, and then I take this with me.
Got it.
So that started that, and then it's just less work, so it's easier to get them out without taking 5 years.
It's almost like how people write books today, I feel like their books are a series of blog posts, right? And then they write blog posts, and they repurpose all those blog posts into a book once they have enough. So that's kind of,
which isn't I mean, that's how I've always written.
Right.
I just don't call them blogs. And then I started in e-news, I think it's 6 or 7 years ago, that comes out every week. People could just email me at ari@zingermans.com. I'll send it back to them. I actually just wrote about democracy this week, which was big. But that's also more writing. And so a lot of what is in the Dignity pamphlet started as pieces there.
So your latest pamphlet is a book on, or a pamphlet on dignity. What is the full title of the pamphlet?
The full title is A Revolution of Dignity in the 21st Century Workplace.
What spurred this writing for you? What was the inspiration?
Yeah. So, well, to answer your other question, though, this is the 8th pamphlet that's not in the books.
Okay.
And I could rattle through all of them, but the one before this was on food and philosophy.
Yes. I want to get that pamphlet too.
Okay. So, yeah, that's, again, I knew nothing about philosophy consciously, but I started to realize, like, instead of being this frou-frou word that I was dismissive of, not productively, but that's how I thought about it. But then I realized it actually has enormous value. It was my mistake not to pay more attention to it. So just helping people in, like you described, in a very down-to-earth way, like, okay, what is this philosophy? Why does it matter in your listener's case, in your restaurant? And I think it's hugely important. So this attempt to share ours. The one before that is called Story of Visioning at Zingerman. So it's more on visioning that wasn't in the books, how we learned the process, how it changed our lives, how we're using it today. Before that was Working Through Hard Times, which was about the pandemic. But the reality is, unfortunately or fortunately, it's not the only hard time we're going to go through.
Right.
So it's really kind of universal. Before that, I did one on humility. Before that, there was one called The Art of Business, which is my belief that business and life are like art or poetry or music. And the more we would think about our lives or our work like we were making a painting that people would look at 100 years from now, or a musical score that somebody was going to perform 50 years from now, we would pay a whole lot more attention because every brushstroke matters.
Yeah, and being an entrepreneur is being creative. It's a different type. It's a different type of art. It's
all art. Yeah, it's all art. And then before that was Bottom Line Change, which is our organizational change recipe, which I highly recommend. It's a whole nother conversation, but it's basically the idea of involving as many people as possible in the conversation before the change is decided on, instead of the other way, which is you and I are the bosses. We go in the back room. We don't actually know what we're doing, but we get frustrated and we think we have to tell everybody what to do. So we announce the change and then everybody freaks out. This is where we're all kind of freaking out at the same time. So it's more work in the beginning, but it's far more effective in the long run. And then I skipped over one that I did on Emma Goldman, who most people listening won't know who she was. But
anarchist.
She was an anarchist. She came from Lithuania in 1885 when she was 16 years old.
Yeah.
By the time she was 20, she was speaking to audiences of like 5,000 people,
crazy.
Which in those days would have been nearly all men. And remember, you and I are talking into microphones and we're only sitting 3 feet apart. But in those days, there was no PA system. So she was speaking to 5,000 people, and she was like 5 feet tall.
Right. And she was probably speaking for hours.
Yeah, for a long talk. Exactly. And she held people's attention.
Yes.
Like I wish she was around now so I could go listen to her.
And I'm selfishly bringing that to the conversation because I feel like we're so hardwired for short form content today.
I like to go the opposite of everybody, so I'm long form.
Yeah, man, me too. I mean, 2 hours plus.
We're going back to LPs. J. Edgar Hoover called her the most dangerous woman in America. I just think she was way ahead of her time. And also that I looked at how to apply her lessons to business, not as opposed to...
What were the big lessons? I mean, really not as opposed to...
Yeah, you're okay. No, you're fine. Well, she wrote... There's a quote from her about dignity that's actually right in the front of this one that said, "The ultimate end of all revolutionary social change is to establish the sanctity of human life, the dignity of man, the right of every human being to liberty and well-being." And I mean, that, and I love that. And actually, in the context of your show, it's not that relevant for most of the world, but for our world it is that she and Alexander Berkman, who was her, at various points, lover, best friend, compatriot, they actually had a cafe, like a luncheonette in Worcester, Massachusetts for about 4 months. And it actually went really well. But they decided that they needed to get back to being more activist. And so they sold it and went back to New York. But I did sort of a business fantasy. So I was like, what if instead of selling it, they stayed in business and made a community of businesses in Worcester, Massachusetts, and practiced what they were preaching in a much smaller setting where I think you have more influence and like what they could have created. And then it's these 18 lessons from her that we could apply. So one of them, just to pick one, is the idea, which I believe very strongly is true, is that the means that we use need to be congruous with the ends we want to achieve.
Yes.
So in other words, if we want to achieve something, we have to act that way now.
Right. Be the change you want to see in the world.
Correct. So the classic example, like we're talking dignity today, or let's say customer service, it happens all the time in businesses. Bosses yell at employees because they gave bad service. I'm like, okay, that's a really good example of where the means you use are completely incongruous with the ends you're trying to achieve. It never works.
Right.
So violence to achieve peace is not generally helpful. Yelling at people to be kinder, not helpful.
Right. And I think you and I feel like are cut from the same cloth in the sense that we both want to see a change in the world. We're both trying to inspire what the future of the industry can look like.
Yeah.
And you're doing it through your actions, by walking the walk, sharing your beliefs, sharing your values. And what I'm trying to do is to find the people like you in the world who are doing this so I can make an example of you.
Yeah. In a good way.
Right. And I feel like one of the things that you embody really well is this idea of growth. Mm-hmm. And I think when people think of growth, they think of scale, they think outwards.
Yeah.
They think about more, cheaper, value, whatever. And your idea of growth is, it looks like going inward. Like really, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So
you can, but so the visioning process, which we mentioned already a couple times, is really about writing the story of your future as if it's already happened. So my good friend Gareth Higgins, who's from the north of Ireland, I'm going from memory to paraphrase him, but he says the story that we tell about our lives is the single most important factor in determining the quality of the life that we'll lead.
So manifesting.
Okay. Correct. And so the vision is the story of the future, right? And so if you don't tell the story of the future you want, it's hard to get to the life you want. Mm-hmm. If you tell a bad story, like whatever, our company sucks, the country sucks, we're screwed, et cetera, it's not going to end up well because you're telling negatives.
Yeah.
So the vision is the story of the future. Part of what's different for us is that we write from the heart. It's our art. It's our poetry. And so it's not what we could do. It's what we want to do.
Right.
So the great poets didn't sit down and say, I wonder what poetry would sell most. I'll write that kind of poetry. Like it's a self-expression. And of course, you're trying to adapt it to the marketplace. So I'm not saying be completely insensitive to what the customer wants, but this is growth the way we want to grow.
Yeah. Get a little closer to that mic, too.
Got it. So Murray Bookchin, who was an interesting anarchist from whom I learned a lot, pointed out, why don't people understand that get as big as you can, as fast as you can, is the growth model of the cancer cell? And I was like, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
I already wasn't trying to get as big as I could, but it's a reminder that, and I always say to people, like, if you're working on a vision and you want to get super big, awesome, because it's your dream. Like, I think it's great. But a lot of people get sort of socially tripped up into pursuing what they think they're supposed to pursue. And then because the deals start coming at them, if you've had even a minor amount of success, the deals start showing up. And so what they're doing is what we used to do before we wrote a vision. They're reacting to problems and possibilities as they arise. So you're kind of rolling along. You kind of feel like you should do something else, and then some, real estate agent calls you from across town, or some hotel calls you, and they offer you a lot to go in, and you're like, yeah, I think it's a good deal. And then but the question is, what kind of life do you really want to lead? And what I always in the food world, I'll compare, like going along. You have some success, and then going along without a vision is like going into dim sum restaurant with no vision of your personal health. Like, they keep bringing the cart and everything looks good, so you just keep eating it.
Yeah.
And when you know how you want to feel after the meal, you know how you want to feel tomorrow, you know what you want your body to be like, you make more intelligent decisions.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think most people, when they're writing their vision and their core values and their mission, I think they're writing it for their team. But I think the reality and what should be known is you're writing it for you.
Yeah.
To keep
you're going to be
honest.
there, dude.
Yeah, and it serves as a filter. So when these opportunities come and present themselves, you can put that opportunity through the filter. Is that where we said we were going to be? Is that
correct?
Does that check the boxes for our core values? If the answer is no, then no thank you.
Correct.
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
People, we teach this regularly through Zing Train, our training business, and I write a lot about it, as you said. And so, people go like, well, but I mean, aren't you going to be missing a lot of opportunity if you do that? And I'm like, yeah. And then I look down at their fingers and I'm like, aren't you missing a lot of opportunity?
Wait, I'm not gonna lie, I don't get it. Spell it out for me.
Well, you and I don't have them, but a lot of people have that gold ring on their third finger.
Okay.
And I'm like, aren't you missing a lot of opportunity? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, you imagined a future and you gave up some opportunity in order to make that future come to fruition. It's not a bad thing.
Got it.
This is no different. And I don't care. You want to open 5,000 franchises, awesome. Do it if that's your dream. It's just understanding that there's no right answer to what success is, and that bigger and more money, if that's your dream, do it. But it's not mine, and and it's not ours. So not that money is irrelevant, not that growth's irrelevant, but there's more to our life than just making more money.
Yeah. So let's get into dignity. So what inspired? So why did you write this pamphlet? What was going on in the world where you're like, I need to write something?
Yeah. So thank you. This pamphlet goes back to the winter of 2022, February 24th, which would have been in our world an unremarkable day. That was pretty, slow. Yeah. It's the slow time of year. It's cold here, and generally that day was actually sunny and cold, but it's often gray and cold. But it's the day Russia invaded Ukraine, and for whatever reasons, we're all hit emotionally differently by different things. And Lord knows there's tragedies all over the world right now, and certainly through history, and I'm a history major, there's no shortage of them. I laughed, but I shouldn't have laughed, because it's horrible what's happened to people for thousands of years. But anyway, that one hit me really hard. And why did it hit me hard? I don't know.
You are a Russian.
I am a Russian history major.
So
I don't know. That's one reason, but it doesn't even really matter. It's just from having written about self-management, I just know that it did hit me hard, and I can make up theories, but it won't change the reality that emotionally it sort of knocked me back. I felt like people were helplessly being attacked for no reason. It was just so black and white. It wasn't like right and both sides did bad things. It was just like one day there was a country that was fine, and the next day the big bully next to him just rolled in for no real reason other than power and politics, and ego and stuff.
Maybe the United Nations getting a little too close.
Well, that's what they say, but you mean NATO. But that's a good story. It's not.
We don't need to get into the details.
But anyway, regardless, I'm not here to analyze. My point is just it sent me down, and I realized after a few days I was sort of in despair, which is not a feeling that I have that often. I don't like it. One way I've learned to get out of that is by studying, because I'm a awkward, introverted history major.
We'll find answers,
and
right?
I like
Figure
to
it
read.
out.
Yeah, I learn, and it
Try to understand.
helps me get out of where I'm at into a better place.
First, seek to understand, right?
Correct. And so I knew a reasonable amount about Russian history, not like I'm a world expert or a PhD professor, but compared to the average American, I probably...
an undergraduate, right?
Yeah, I knew more than most Americans, let's leave it at that. But I really knew next to nothing about Ukrainian history, and although Vladimir Putin would argue there is no Ukrainian history, it's all Russian, that's why they invaded, but... The truth is there's a fascinating, thousands of years of history with culture and language and all sorts of things. So anyway, it interested me. I started to study more and more, and then after a while I discovered what anybody who had paid a modicum of more attention than I had would have already known, which is that in February of 2014, the Ukrainian people, for all practical purposes, threw out the Russian-sponsored leader, and that came to be called the Revolution of Dignity. And when Russia invaded, I had felt so helpless because I just, I don't know what to do,
Right.
And if I have something to do, then at least I feel like I'm dealing with the situation. I can't fix it on my own, but at least I'm moving in the right direction. And it did cross my mind to go to Poland with Jose Andres and World Central Kitchen, and, but I was like, not going to be any better at scooping soup than anybody else,
right.
And I got a lot to do here, and it's a nice idea. It might make me feel better, but it's not really going to...
Well, you also had this realization that if you want to do something,
right,
it's better to...
Well, that's what I realized. So when I read about the Revolution of Dignity, all of a sudden I was like, that's what I can do, because I can't stop Putin. I've never touched a gun in my life. It's way out of my bandwidth. But what I can do is make dignity happen here.
Okay.
All day, every day, because, and then I'll pause, but because I really believe where dignity is the norm, people like Putin can't be in charge. And that could be true in a restaurant, in a community, or in a country.
Yeah.
And conversely, and this is what I wrote about in the E-News this week about democracy, where someone like Putin is in charge, you can't have dignity. Like, we couldn't work, the way we work would be illegal there.
Right. And this is why I love you, Ari, because, on my vision, I believe that the restaurant industry is going to change the world. And I think we're going to do it by seeing the change we want to be, or being the change we want to see, right? And taking these values, taking these ethics, and implementing them on a local scale nationally.
Yes.
Right. And I think that lesson right there, if there's something happening in Russia or in China or in any other crazy corner of the planet, the way to do something about it is to be the opposite of the injustice that you're seeing, and implement it in your own backyard.
Yes.
And so compound off of that.
Well, that's what anarchism really is.
Yeah.
It's a belief system and a way of life. It's not a political program. So it's how I treat you and how I treat myself and how I treat the dishwasher is anarchism.
What is it? I think people hear anarchy and they just think
they
people
do.
running around with
that
blowing off fireworks,
the exact
maybe being
opposite.
naked.
That's
what's going on?
nihilism and destruction. Nihilism dates back to Nechayev in the 19th century in Russia, the nihilists, where they were destroy.
Okay.
Anarchism, obviously there's 1,000 ways, and I'm not the world expert. I'm only telling you my own application and interpretation of it. But Gustav Landauer was a very, for me, interesting and inspiring German Jewish pacifist anarchist in the late 19th, early 20th century. He was kicked to death by the German army in what you could say was sort of a early 20th century version of January 6th here in the U.S. People ran rampant on what was then the new Democratic government, and they didn't survive. But anyway, he was very inspiring for me. He was a good friend of Martin Buber, the philosopher, and among many things he said that really opened my mind was, he said, we have no political program, we have beliefs against politics. So I'll be voting in November, and I hope everybody else does. I don't know when this is going to air. But that said...
This will air September.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect timing.
The anarchism is not about replacing the boss with a new boss. It's about a way of life. It's a belief system. And so it really... Howard Ehrlich was a very interesting anarchist from Baltimore, passed away a few years ago. He asked us, in an essay, he goes, who will make the anarchist revolution? And then he answered himself, you and I right now. And so it's really, dignity is, in a lot of ways, I think, the anarchist revolution. There's more to it than that, but yes.
So, I mean, when you think of anarchy, is it chaos, disorder?
No,
or
it's not. That's a complete misnomer.
Okay.
It's sort of like looking at the Crusades and saying Christianity is about violence and killing people.
So what is at the core of anarchy? Because I don't know if it's clear.
Well, this is me, and you'll
Your
find every person who
right.
studies anarchism will tell you their own, and I
sounds
respect,
like anarchy.
Well, I respect that, but it's the opposite of chaos. It's all about organization. It's just that you're involving the people who are part of the organization in the organizing, as opposed to imposing it by autocratic rule of the hierarchy. So we think of autocrat as Vladimir Putin, but it can also be the autocratic boss in a restaurant too.
Right.
So it doesn't mean there's no operational hierarchy.
It's a flat
Somebody's
hierarchy.
running in our world. Somebody runs the line.
Right.
Somebody's running the front door. They're making decisions. But what anarchism, in my sense, tells me is just because you're running the line and you're really great at it doesn't make you a better person than the new dishwasher.
So sorry.
No, go ahead.
I want to say what I think of is like a division of power.
Mm-hmm.
It's spreading the power out.
Yeah.
It's not having one person at the top or one body at the top. It's saying, hey, we need to flatten out the hierarchy and also flatten out the social hierarchy too.
Yeah. Yes. So it's not thinking hierarchically, which like get big as you can, as fast as you can, is so in the water of people's world that it's hard to stop thinking hierarchically, which because you're not going to ask me, but they go like, what's the number one thing people need to know? What's your top 5 this? What's your top 2 that, and it's just, why are you always looking for the one thing? Like,
there is no one thing.
Everybody matters. So the dishwasher matters. The new bus person matters. The customer who buys a lot matters, and the customer who only bought a cup of coffee, you don't know. They could turn out to be. So in the context of dignity, which we'll get to eventually, I want to treat everybody with dignity, because even if we fired somebody, I'm still going to be committed to treating him to dignity.
Yeah, I'm pulling out my phone right now because I want to reference a couple books that I've been listening to all over, driving all over the country, and it's just the timing feels right for me to be talking to you, because the books I'm listening to right now is Power and Progress, our 1,000-year struggle over technology and prosperity, which talks about this idea of there being people at the top, usually the influencers, whoever has power usually controls the technology, and there's an ulterior motive for them to control the technology. Like today, our issue is like people controlling technology who own all the data, right? And they're not quite being honest and transparent with, the power. So, and the other one is winner takes all. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, it's pointing back to these like giant tech companies, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Meta, and they control the world.
Right.
And like along those lines of what you're saying is that you have these entities, these not necessarily political entities, but they're these bodies at the top controlling everything.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's all actually out of control, but they have consolidated a lot of money and power.
But they have power, and if you have power, you control the narrative.
Yes. Well, you have more influence on the narrative.
Right.
We know that just having power doesn't always get the narrative where you want. But regardless, I guess what I have tried to do is to learn to apply it within our organization. I don't know how to apply it at the scale of a country. It's too big for my small brain. But one of the other good things that I learned from Gustav Landauer is so a lot of anarchist work was to get rid of the state, and I'm not here to argue that one way or the other. It's not my issue. I don't know how to run a country without something. It's a big project. But what Landauer said is, he said it's not that the people are in the state, It's that the state is in the people.
So when you say the state, you're talking about the values?
The government.
The government?
So he said when you're trying to destroy the state, which is a lot of what people were trying to do, he said when you're locked in a negative relationship.
Okay.
I relate it to me pushing my mother away all the time
and
arguing with her and not doing what she wanted, but it's a very negative, resistant relationship. He said the answer is to not try to destroy the state. It's to go somewhere and create free communities where you can live free and, do all these things and stop trying to push them off and make something positive happen instead. And when I read that, I was like, that's what we're doing. Now, we're highly imperfect. I'm not claiming we got all this down. We mess up every 3 minutes, but it's trying to work in ways that are more aligned with thinking less, thinking hierarchically, treating people with dignity. We have 260 something of the 700 people who work here right now own a share in the business, in the organization. We just rolled out a perpetual purpose trust, so Paul and I basically are gifting the brand to itself so it can never be sold. And in a good way, by doing that, we're foregoing some massive flipping of the company to some bigger company to make a lot of money. And I'm not saying it because we're so great. It just seems like the right thing to do. It's going to leave the organization and the community, if we do our work well, for many decades after Paul and I have left the planet. So, we're open book management. It's just trying to do the stuff that seems right in a way that scale is makes it less stoppable in your language, and that allows us to make a difference in people's lives. And yes, I hope everybody votes because it does matter. At the same time, I have way more influence. I don't have control over anything, let alone myself, but I have a way more influence within our own organization.
Right. So back to this moment of despair that you were feeling. You had this moment of despair. You said, okay, what can I do about this? And then it kind of dawned on you that if I want to do something about it, I could do something about it where I can, which is back home, leaving the state and going back into your community to make to follow up, to tie it together, right? So what is dignity?
Well, that's a good question. And so one of the things that we've done here, and really I learned to do this from Maggie Bayless at Zingtrain, who has helped us enormously. So you already know from reading, but one of the things that I think has helped us to do what we do in a super practical way is just to take nice concepts like great service. Like nobody goes, service is stupid, I'm not doing it. It's just that they have zero definition. So, like, no chef goes spice your food badly,
right? Great service is
relative.
But
if you don't taste together, you don't know what spice well means, because what it means for one chef is not the same as the next.
Right.
So we've worked hard over the years to take these inspiring concepts that nobody's opposed to, but has no clarity of definition, and give them definition. So we have 3 steps to great service. We have 5 steps to handling a complaint. We have 4 elements of writing a vision. They're not SOPs, not standard operating procedures. They're recipes. Because just like cooking, you need to adapt to the moment, adapt to the ingredients. If you're using local tomatoes in season, it's different than if you're not.
If we're making sourdough in the winter, we might have to use time and temperature a little differently.
So I took, dignity, awesome, revolution, dignity, great idea. And then I was like, well, what does that really mean? Like, what do I do? And so then I just kept reading and studying and talking and trying to figure it out. And I came up with 6 things that I've now been teaching for 2 years, and we're trying to practice for 2 years, and that's what I got.
And you strike me as the kind of person that, like, when something comes into your head and it feels right, something clicks, and like the way, like, when you can, like, oh, like, this is what I've been feeling all along, but now I have the words to describe what I'm feeling.
Well, I never thought about what dignity really meant. I thought it was a good idea, like everybody does, but this gave me tangible stuff, and then I just try it, and if it works, and then I bounce it off people who I respect their opinion and their view, and then I try it more, and then I teach it a few times awkwardly, and it just sort of expands from there. And now I'm 2 years down the road, so I feel like it works.
Right. And then, so when I was reading your pamphlet, it sounds like you kind of defined what the 6 elements of dignity are, and then you put those 6 elements of dignity through 3 filters: food, leadership, and service. Is that the? Yeah,
I mean, it really needs to apply to everything, but I as I you experienced from reading, and as I intended to do, I'm like, if I say this once, it'll be helpful. But the reality is, if we're really going to do this every day, all day long, I got to show more examples of how it applies. So that's where those came from. But the reality is, I think in the idea of making a revolution of dignity, and I'm not trying to co-opt the Ukrainian one, like let's say it's small r, small d, not as a historical event, but a way of life, then I need to do it with everybody I work with. I need to do it at home with Tammy Guilfoyle, my significant other. I need to do it with our dogs. I need to do it with the cashier at the grocery store. Well, I don't go to the grocery store, but the cashier at the drugstore. I need to deal with it with the person who cut me off on the way here today. You know?
You're being inspired by the movement that's happening in Ukraine, and paying homage, paying respect to what they're doing is letting them influence you.
Yes.
And how you live your life.
Yes.
And those 6 elements of dignity are just run through the 6 elements and we'll unpackage them.
Absolutely. So the first is to honor the humanity of everybody that we deal with, and we'll talk more about
that's
it.
one.
The second one is to be authentic in all our interactions, and then parenthetically, but not by acting out. That's a super important part
2.
we can come back to. The third one is to make sure that everyone has a meaningful say. We
3.
could define later what that is. The fourth is to begin everything with positive beliefs. This goes back to the beliefs book. The fifth is to commit to helping everyone here get to greatness, or everyone we deal with. And then last but not least, the sixth, which I think is the hardest, is some meaningful application of equity.
Okay, let's unpackage these. Going back
let's
to the
unpack
first.
them like Christmas.
So the 6 elements of dignity. The first is honor the essential humanity of everyone we work with. What does that mean?
So here's an anarchist application, right? So, you talked about technology. So one of the things that's happening with technology, and it's in our language and our culture, is the assignment of identities to groups. So all day long, you'll hear stuff like, Gen Xers do this, Americans do this, millennials do this, we're in Ann Arbor, Michigan fans are like this. And it's just, it's really...
it's human nature to put things into boxes.
Well, I don't know that that's true, but it's what we're used to. We've been trained to do it. And so... I'm not saying that they're unhelpful. Like, there's a statistic that tells you that consumers want to eat between 6 and 7, then it's helpful. But if you assume that every person you meet wants to eat between 6 and 7, it's not helpful. So I want to invert that to what I believe is actually true, which is that although there may be merit to the statistics, the person is not the statistic. And that every human being is unique. There's really no one like you in the world. Now, of course, I could find you things that go like, men of your age that wear glasses, like, I don't know, but the point is, if I really do this, then I need to know, like, who are you? Where did you come from? How did you get here? What do you care about? And I don't mean I need to write a 20-page oral history on every single person I meet, but just to try to honor that the person's got struggle. Like, there's nobody in the world that's not struggling.
So what I'm hearing is make no assumptions about anyone.
Yeah, except that if you believe that they matter and that they have a life, and that part of our work in making dignity a reality is to honor that story that they have, and then and this is also true, of course, to ourselves, to honor our own story and our uniqueness. That's a big deal.
So honoring the essential humanity. So when you're saying the humanity of everyone, are you saying that at the core of what it means to be a human, the most basic human needs, honor that?
Yeah. Well, it's just people... It's very easy to be angry at someone. It's easy to dismiss someone. You know how they are. But there's no they. There's just people. And so even the people who I disagree with the most, whose whatever political views I don't align with, whose way of eating I don't particularly align with, they still matter. And I can still honor that they have feelings, that they have struggles, they have hopes and dreams, they have whatever, kids, significant others, pets, farms, projects, music, I don't know, and so let's just keep it close to home. So inside the organization, inside the restaurant, inside the business, like everybody that we work with, even if we're freaking out and they're making, in quotes, making us crazy today,
right,
like they got a life.
Right.
So I don't have to, doesn't mean they get to do whatever they want, because we all need to work together and we need to meet the standards we committed to, etc. But just to know that the dishwasher has a family, to know that the new server just graduated from college, and what did they study?
Right. So if we're later in the book, you talk about filtering these things through food, and leadership. So as we're going through this list of 6, I think it makes sense to apply those filters after you've asked. So if we're talking about honoring the essential humanity of everyone with the work relative to food, what does that look like?
So it's just, this is again my interpretation. Everybody could have their own, but it's just like this coffee that I'm drinking right now comes from Chiapas in Mexico. So where is Chiapas? Why does it matter? What's its history? How did coffee get there?
Right.
What's the history of coffee? And it's not that pretty in Chiapas. How is this grown right now? Very different than the historical colonial application of or bringing of coffee, etc. Why does it taste like it did? Who roasted it at our coffee company? They did an actually awesome job. It's really delicious. So it's just like honor the food, and I grew up on American industrial food. Kraft macaroni and cheese that came in the box, it wasn't any different in Chicago where I grew up than it would have been in the Shenandoah Valley. Like, it's the same. And that's the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is just like every person has a story.
Yeah.
Every person has beliefs, a series of events that has made them who they are, and you have to honor that.
Yeah.
So too does food have a story, has a history, has a significance, and to look at that. And I think it's really important. It's something I've been trying to echo, and I don't know when this dawned on me, but it blows my mind that food is listed like in its purest form as a commodity. Which is interesting because food was once life.
Well, it's not a commodity. That's a belief. Then they assign language to it.
Right.
But the food and philosophy pamphlet, gets into more of this in detail. But, every product has a story. So just because we're sitting at the Roadhouse bread, we call it Roadhouse bread that we make at the bakehouse. That
I have some in my refrigerator right now.
It's very good, but it's not new. It's the old bread from New England and the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. And Europeans wanted wheat. That was what they believed to be best. It didn't grow well in the cold of New England, so they finally sort of succumbed to reality and started to use corn, which was, of course, indigenous, that Native people had been growing and living on for millennia. And then also rye, which grew better in northern climates. And so that recipe is in like every cookbook from that era. But I don't think anybody after we do this podcast, maybe people will start making it. But anyway, if you don't know the story of that bread, it's just a good bread.
Yeah.
But when you start to for me, like you understand where it came from and how it brought, molasses is used in it as a small amount as a sweetener, and molasses came from the Indies, and there was enslavement in the West Indies, and all of these things are coming together through each product.
Well, I guess the point I love all of that, the adding the story and adding the really understanding how this thing became to be what it is through the history.
Yeah.
There's substance to that.
Yeah.
But I think back to this idea of honor the essential humanity of everyone we work with. Humans are living creatures. Like, honor all living creatures, right?
Yeah.
Food was once a living creature for the most part, with the exception of maybe salt, right?
Yeah.
So like this idea of just like honoring food and for the sake, like it's all connected. It's kind of how that resonated with me. What about leadership? Putting honoring essential humanity of everyone we work with, putting that through the filter of leadership.
Well, it's, so in part 2 of the Guide to Good Leading is the essay on servant leadership, and all these things overlap in a good way. Part of servant leadership here at Zingerman's is to treat everybody we hire as our customer. And on our 3 steps, 3 steps to great service, the first one is to find out what the customer wants. So if the employee is your customer and you want to find out what they want, I need to know who they are, like what matters to them. So if we have somebody who's working here for the summer while they finished high school and they're going to go away to California or wherever to college in the fall, they're looking for something totally different than somebody who just came in and really aspires to become a leader in our organization and maybe become a managing partner in one of our businesses. And I need to know who they are,
right,
and what their hopes are in order to make their experience as positive as possible.
Yeah.
So just like knowing, like, what did you study? What are you interested in? What are you reading? How's things going?
Listen.
Yeah, and not just dismissing them as one more, in quotes, cog in a machine, which is very inhuman.
Right.
This is to just honor it. And again, they need to work at a professional level too. So this isn't like just, I don't feel good, so you don't have to do a good job. It's just understanding that, whatever, somebody who works here's, childhood dog just was put down, was older, but it just what caught her. They didn't expect it, and it's tragic. I went through that. It's horrible. And so just being sensitive to her situation, which doesn't require the whole restaurant stopping or her not having to give great service, but we can honor who she is and what she's struggling with. And then when people feel honored and treated with dignity in this way, it's a lot easier for them to actually do good work because they don't feel dismissed.
So we put dignity through the filter of food. We put it through the filter of leadership. How do you put dignity through the filter of service?
It's the same thing. It's just every customer is coming from their own place, and what you want today is to sit here with me for a couple hours.
I love this.
But I understand. But you might come in next week and you're having a really hard day. You got 25 minutes. You want to get in and out. And if I try to talk to you for 2 hours, you're like, dude, I got to get back to work. This is annoying and frustrating. So, and some people, whatever it might be, we can be dismissive of people's allergy issues, or we could look at what's going on in their life. And, when somebody's having a hard day, we can make up negative stories about how they're a jerk, or we could think about it with compassion and say, I wonder what happened that they're having such a hard day.
Yeah. Okay, so if we're covering the 6 elements of dignity, we covered the first, the honoring of essential humanity of everyone we work with. The second element of dignity is be authentic in all of our interactions.
Yep.
So
without acting out.
Without acting out. So what does I guess authenticity mean to you?
I think it's being true to who we are. We have it in our 2032 vision, and people say it a lot, is bringing your whole self to work. It's becoming a little cliche, but we really mean it. It's easy to say be yourself. It's hard to do. Like, it's years of therapy and self-work and trying to figure stuff out. And,
one of the reasons why I love the restaurant industry, just to interject real quick, is that it is the most embracing of authentic people who want to be authentic. And that's what I've found, is that you can be the truest version of yourself in the restaurant industry. And I think the word we use often is professionalism to describe a way you need to be and act to get along with a bunch of people, which means, like, don't talk about politics, don't talk about other interests, but just like stay in this like box. And it's hard to be authentic when you have to act a certain way that is inauthentic to how you would show up.
Yeah. Well, this isn't free reign. If somebody's authenticity is to be the head of the local Nazi party chapter, that's outside the frame of our values and our vision. So it won't work to do that, but I can still treat them with dignity, and I'm not being flip while they leave, so that's my self-discipline around this. But more importantly, it's just helping people be real. So to be able to, I don't know, somebody that the other day, and, we do icebreakers at the beginning of meetings, and we use energy. We talk a lot about energy management. My friend Anise Kavanaugh, who taught me all that, she'd be a good person. I think you did too. So anyway, as part of the icebreaker, with people to give a minute or two how they're doing, and she was just saying how her son was having a hard time in school. It's just being real. Like, why hide it? It wasn't like she didn't work all day. She did, but now if I'm her colleague and I know that her son's having a hard time in school, I could just be a little softer that day. I could wait 3 weeks and ask how he's doing. Like, I'm not the therapist, but I can be sensitive and compassionate towards what's going on with people, and it allows her to talk about what's happening, because if you have to hide it, like you said, it doesn't work. The reason not acting out is in there is because it's commonly done now to be like, unload a I can swear up a storm, but to unload a bunch of epithets and put somebody down and go, I'm just telling you how I feel, and it's like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
Like, that's very unhelpful. To talk about it in a way that's productive could be, I'm really anxious that sales are down, I'm really stressing out, and I'm having a hard time staying grounded, and when you do this, I'm reacting this way. And I'm not saying I get it right all the time either, but dumping on other people
Void of
is
emotion.
not effective authenticity.
Right. Like, speak what's on your mind, but do it in a way that's respectful and not overcome with emotion and, like, being reactive. Not thoughtful.
It's being appropriately vulnerable, sharing hopes and dreams, knowing that other people won't like them. It happens all the time.
So how do you create a space that in I guess allows for people to be their authentic self?
Well, it's work. I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of. I mean, just to be authentic to ourselves is already a lot of work. It's not that easy.
Right.
I mean, it's hard for me, and I'm not 16, so I've been working at this a long time, and I still struggle with it.
Well, do you think it's easier to be authentic to yourself the older you get?
No, I don't know. I mean, it depends on how you handle your aging. So we have some 17-year-olds that work here who
we can hear them in the background right now.
Well, they're some of them their emotional maturity is like awesome and inspiring, and I'm really inspired by it.
That blows my mind. I can't imagine. Like, I mean, the frontal lobe doesn't finish rounding off.
Right, but there's 75-year-olds that are acting out all day long on TV, and it's not helpful. And so I'm not saying you can't gain wisdom with time. I think we do, but age alone doesn't ensure wisdom. So anyway, there's techniques. I mean, we teach classes on how to have caring conversations. I grew up in a family where everybody cut each other off all the time. That's how we grew up. It doesn't bother me at all, but most of the world doesn't like it. So learning how to be a better listener, learning how to disagree, as Paul says, my business partner Paul Saginaw says, without being disagreeable. Being grounded and conscious, like Anish taught me, to be mindful of my energy, so that if I'm freaking out, to be not like sending this negative aggro energy towards you, because you can feel it.
Right, and we have a choice on how we show up.
Absolutely.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Okay, so number 1, honor the essential humanity of everyone we work with. Number 2, be authentic in all of the interactions, in all of our interactions without, what was the last part again?
Acting out.
Without acting out. And then number 3.
Like if I were acting out, I would yell at you now for forgetting that.
I know, I should make a note.
No, I'm just joking.
Commas, without acting out. Okay, and then number 3, make sure everyone has a meaningful say.
Yeah. So this is I think really important. It's not the norm in most businesses. Here we could be always better at it, but we're already trying through a lot of things. Open book management we've been doing for almost 30 years. So it's a system. It's not reading people the financial statements. Zing Train teaches our 2-day version of it. It's the book on it is Great Game of Business by Jack Stack and Bo Burlingham. But it's a system that involves everybody, and I say everybody in quotes because not everybody really shows up, even though my fantasy is they do. But it involves everybody in helping run the business. And in order to run the business, they got to see some numbers.
Right.
And what's to hide? Like, I mean, I don't know. there's nothing to hide. What the profit levels they think you're making are way higher than the reality.
Right. We hear all the time, first seek to understand, then seek to be understood. So in order for our staff to be understood, they have to understand.
Right. So we do that. All our meetings that we opened up years ago, unless it's like a super private, confidential thing, whatever. Like, come to the meeting. You got an idea. People make up a lot of stories about what their managers are doing in the back room, but the truth is we don't know what we're doing either. We're just trying to figure it out. So, dude, like, you got an idea. Let's go. Come on, show up.
And why is it important to make everyone feel like, or to literally make sure everyone has
a meaningful say? Well, diversity dictates that everybody has a perspective that I don't have. So if we cut people out of the conversation, we're missing out on good ideas.
Yeah.
Number two, no one wants to be helpless. I mean, we become accustomed to having no say. But think about when you're like, what if you were the customer in the restaurant and you came in and I'm like, okay, today, son, you're going to have a burger and we're going to cook it medium well. All right, we'll give you a choice of cheese. Do you want Swiss or cheddar? Like, I mean, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, this is crazy. Who would do this? But that's what we're doing in the business. And this doesn't mean we vote on every single issue, but there's ways to have a meaningful conversation. So, like, meaningful to me, just as I've been in some bigger corporate settings, I'm like, this doesn't mean like you run a focus group and then somebody writes a report and you read it and argue about what they meant and then don't listen to any of it.
Yeah.
This is like, it's a real conversation. So sometimes it's just talking to somebody. We're in restaurants on shift, like, what do you think about this? And realizing that everybody has interesting perspectives. And so we're open book. I mean, it actually happened here. I don't know what today is, Friday. On Wednesday at their kitchen huddle, it was 7-8 people. And here's real life story. Like, we sell a ton of fried chicken at this restaurant. We don't sell hardly any wings. Okay. People don't order fried chicken wings. I mean,
Are you
one.
getting whole chickens?
Yeah. But we get parts because we use so much.
Yeah.
Regardless. So then it's like, well, there's a lot of waste from the chicken wings because we don't move them and we sell tons of fried chicken, just not that part.
Right.
So then it's like, well, what do you do? And do we get rid of the wings? Do we keep, anyway. Well, the two of the people who work the fry station were there. So they're talking about like, what's the waste? And then, yeah, you're right. And they have opinions about what to do too. Well, when they're in the conversation, like, don't you feel more engaged in your work when somebody actually listened to what you had to say?
Right. And aren't you more likely to buy in if you had an influence over that decision?
Right. And it's not like they just get their way, but I don't just get my way either. So we're all in conversation. So, and then we have the bottom line change process. I mentioned that pamphlet. So anybody could start a change. They may not be the decision maker, but we're trying to teach them how to think like a leader. Like, I can't just go and order what I want either. You got to get people on board, and this is what leaders do. So
yeah, and you're friends with Tom Walter, right?
Yeah, he learned it. Yeah,
he talks about the integral organization, where no matter where you are in the hierarchy, you can contribute.
Yes, and he doesn't know it, but that's anarchism.
So is this a conversation that you guys have had?
No, I don't care if people call it anarchism or not, but it's just the point is that you're honoring the value of people's perspective. And yes, by definition, we're like, I don't even agree with myself half the time. Paul and I, my business, we've been partners for 42 years in business. We disagree all the time. I mean, it's not weird. Right. It's normal to disagree. It's just trying to bring the collective together in the belief you could come up with something better.
So with this third element of the 6 elements of dignity, make sure everyone has a meaningful say. And correct me, this is how I read it, at least. When I was going through your pamphlet, I saw that you went through the 6 elements, and then you brought up the subject of food and leadership, and you kind of forced these elements through those filters. Yeah. So how does food and leadership, how does making sure everybody has a meaningful say go through those filters of food, relative to food and leadership?
So with the products that we work with, because it's true for anything. So my friend Natalie Channon has a company called Alabama Channon. They work with cotton. They only use American-grown cotton, and they do a lot of hand sewing and stuff. So, or if you think of I think I used an example in one of these essays about a guy who makes guitars. So, like, you need to listen to the wood. You got to pay attention to the fabric. What is it telling you? And so in our culinary world, if we try to force the ingredient to be something that it isn't, it's not helpful. And this is what good cooks or good chefs are always doing, is they're like tuning into the nuanced flavors of whatever it might be, an olive oil, a tomato, a pasta, and they're trying to help bring out the best in it. That's what we do.
So it's opening the channels to let people do that.
Yeah, whereas the industrial model would be the other way. Like, we get rid of heirloom tomatoes because they're so variable, and we could just go with these other ones that are the same every day, and it's so much easier.
It's
so
cheaper.
Instead of us honoring what the product wants to tell us, we're imposing our need for consistency on the product.
Got it. What about leadership?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, part of this is internal too, because it's like being imperfectly in touch with my own. Do you swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
It's being in touch with my own bullshit, and I'm freaking out in my head all the time, so like giving myself a meaningful say, because there's times in life where I'm just like, well, I'm just going to go with what they want, but then I'm being a victim, but there's like, we know this, I'm going to impose my way or I'm going to go with their way, but in the middle, by the way, is anarchism. Yeah, but that's where you're both having a collaborative, dignity-based conversation where we're open to other people's perspectives, but we're not completely collapsing in on ourselves either. And we're upholding our own dignity, but not dumping on the people around us.
I love that. Okay, number 1, honor the essential humanity of everyone we work with. Number 2, be authentic in all of our interactions without acting out.
Strong work, dude.
Make sure everyone has a meaningful say. And then number 4, begin every interaction with positive beliefs. Dive into that.
Yeah. So this is from that very large 600-page book on beliefs. But,
which I'm leaving with today.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
So I never paid any attention to beliefs until about 10 or 12 years ago. I mean, it sounds silly because I was doing all this stuff and we were teaching through Zing and I was writing, but I just... I knew the word, like dignity. I knew the word, but I just never gave it any thought, nor did I understand how important they were. And I was reading Bob and Judith Wright's book, Transform. They're from Chicago. The book is not really about beliefs. It's a very good book. But anyway, in there was a self-fulfilling belief cycle, which I had never seen or thought of. Bob can't remember who he learned it from, so I don't know who to give ultimate credit to, but later I realized that was a good life metaphor, because although they talk about self-made people, no one is a self-made person. So anyway, it's a self-fulfilling cycle, and it turns out that every action that you and I take, including us sitting here today to record this podcast, is based on what we believe. We have lots of beliefs. Most of us don't know we have them. You've touched on some of them, like the belief that getting bigger as a business is better, which...
Right. Well, it's interesting. I was hoping. I mean, I'm gonna shelf this, but I'd love to come back to it before that, because there is this balance. When I'm learning in almost everything, there's a balance between order and chaos. And I think what you're saying in the middle of that finding that balance is anarchy. And when I started this podcast going back 10 years ago, I was all about the independence. Like, I was trying to help. I was trying to help the independents take business back from the big corporations of the world. But as I started studying and learning more, I've learned there is something to be said about growing, creating opportunity for others. So there is a balance. Yeah. And I want to get more into that. I mean, maybe before we say goodbye, but back to beliefs.
So we have a lot of beliefs. We got beliefs about coffee. We got beliefs about days of the week. Like, I've been working in restaurants for 40-something years. I'm not religious. We don't have kids. I could care. My significant other's a farmer. I don't care. Sunday, Tuesday, it's the same. Like, it doesn't bother me working Sunday. But people who, I understand, like, they're 9 to 5, they have kids, they are religious, whatever reasons, there's no judgment. It's just like, to them, like, if they have to work, oh man, you got to work Sunday. What a bummer. It's like, well, for me, it doesn't make any difference. So, it's not right or wrong. It's just understanding that the idea that working Sunday means you're like a loser or you got the short end of the stick is a belief.
Yeah,
like
it's a limiting belief.
It's a belief.
Yeah.
If you like that belief, run with it. But you could actually change your belief and eliminate some of the misery of your life and just go like, let's have some joy. It's Sunday. Why not? So we have a lot of beliefs. Based on our beliefs, we take action. Based on our actions, the people around us form their own beliefs. Based on their beliefs, they take action.
Yeah.
And what blew my mind is like 95% of the time their action reinforces the original belief.
Yeah, it's amazing how many shitty beliefs there are out there.
Yeah, and we all had them, and so anyway, this is a whole podcast in itself, but I started to look at beliefs as the root system of our lives because we don't talk about them. We just argue over the actions but the actions are based on the beliefs. So we all know if you pick a weed at the surface line, it's just going to grow back and probably stronger than it was before you picked it. So if you get people to change their behavior, but they didn't actually change their belief, it's not really going to go away.
That's floating around out there. Treat friends and family like, amazed. Like be good to friends and family. Treat them well. But when it comes to business, anything's fair.
Well, that's their belief. Well, I don't think it's fair at home either, but it could be equitable, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Right.
But what I'm advocating for myself first, not and everybody else can decide what they want to do, but is I want to do this with everybody. Like this is the same when I go home. If I'm living well, I treat Tammy this way at home. I treat the dogs this way. Like honor who the dog is. I mean, I'm not being flip, but like honor who the dog is. And she does dog rescue, and it's incredible like what she's able to do with rescue dogs, and she's doing these things. She doesn't list them out, but like she's honoring who the dog is. She's not forcing the dog to be something it's not. She listens. She wants the dog to be itself, right? So instead of making the dog be something else, now it doesn't mean the dog does whatever it wants, but she's honoring who the dog is. She's giving the dog a say in how things go. She's being listening to what the dog likes to do. She's choosing to believe the best. So instead of a lot of people like that's a bad dog, she's like, no, there's something going on that's leading the dog to act that way.
Right.
She is helping the dog to get to greatness for the dog, and they're living good lives. And then she's trying to have some equity where she has a life and the dog has a good life. And it doesn't mean she gives up everything for the dogs. And so that's what she's doing. I mean, she doesn't list it in these 6 ways. So positive beliefs. So I looked at beliefs as the root system of our lives. I like simple models that honor the natural complexity of the world. That's what these 6 elements are. So here's another one. Beliefs are the root system. There's negative beliefs, neutral beliefs, and positive beliefs. If beliefs are the root system, what sort of outcomes will you always get from negative beliefs?
Negative.
Correct.
Yeah.
Negative outcomes. Neutral beliefs don't do much. Positive beliefs create positive outcomes.
But can beliefs be relative? Sorry, did I disrupt your train of thought?
I'm used to interruption. I work in restaurants.
So
my life is an interruption.
If you can, if I didn't mess it up too bad.
So negative beliefs create negative outcomes. Neutral beliefs don't do much. Positive beliefs create positive outcomes. Now, I'm not saying there's no problems. It's just you could have negative beliefs about a problem, which basically says we're victims, we're screwed, it's Eric's fault.
Right.
Well, or you could have positive beliefs about a problem, which is this sucks. What are we going to do about it? Like in the pandemic, you could say we're screwed. This is horrible. This sucks. The government sucks. Or you could say this is tragic. Let's pull together and figure out what to do.
What about like invasive beliefs? Like this belief that the sole purpose of a business is to return
it's
shares
just a belief.
To the stakeholders.
It's
right?
a belief. It's like the belief women shouldn't leave the home. I mean, it's just
somebody
a belief.
might see that belief, right, and think it's a positive belief that if you focus on returning, the profit to the shareholders, then everybody wins. It's a positive belief.
And I'm not telling them not to work like that. I'm just saying I'm not going to work like that.
Because I guess what I'm saying is like beliefs can be relative, right?
Probably. Isn't everything relative?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So like how do you label something a negative or a positive belief?
So a negative belief would be that person who holds that belief is a jerk.
Okay.
A positive belief would be, wow, that's how they were raised in business. That's what they got taught. In that context, what they're doing makes total sense.
And they can
Their
choose.
intentions are good, but they're operating with what I would suggest might be less than effective long-term unholistic beliefs.
And I will.
But they're not a
that.
bad person,
Right.
and they're not trying to gouge everybody. They just have been led to believe that this is what is right, and they believe it.
Instead of putting energy into explaining why that person is wrong, put energy into living your belief.
Correct.
Got it.
And don't waste a lot of time yelling at them about it because it won't change their beliefs.
So how does
so in a restaurant, here's a real life situation. So let's say, whatever, the employee's not doing a good job. So a negative belief would be they're a terrible employee.
right?
A positive belief would be they're having a really hard time. They may not cut it here. Let's try to, what do we want to do? Should we try them more training? Should we try them in a different position? Should we suggest maybe this isn't the right industry for them, but I could call my friend down the road who has an office and maybe they'd be really good on the front desk.
Did I give them everything they need to be
Yeah,
successful?
so it's not saying they could just stay here and do mediocre work, but it's coming up with the belief that they can get to greatness, but there's something going on, whether our construct, the way I'm teaching them, their current state of mind that's getting in the way. Let's help something good happen.
Any other elements of begin every interaction with a positive belief before we move on?
I mean, we could go for days on beliefs, but it's just to be mindful, like what is your belief about whatever? And here's a concrete one in our industry. Server goes to the table, the customer's kind of gruff, comes back to the side stand. Man, that guy's a total jerk. Okay, well, if you now follow, I know I've internalized that belief cycle, but if you believe the customer is a jerk,
Yeah.
what will your energy be like when you come back to
You're
the
gonna
table?
be a jerk.
Okay, so your energy will be dissonant and negative.
Yeah.
What will the customer now believe about you?
You're a jerk.
You're a jerk, and how will the customer treat you? Badly, and you're like, it's even worse than I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so now try a different set of beliefs. Wow, I wonder what's going on in his life. We don't know. Maybe his mother's in hospice. Maybe his father just had a stroke. Maybe he just got laid off from his job. Maybe his kid's having trouble in school. I have no idea.
Gotcha.
So if I start with more like, how's your day going? Or I got bad energy from them. Why don't I bring them an extra taste of something?
Yeah.
Right? So let's try to break out of that cycle instead of going to war with each other, so to speak. Let's try to make peace and honor that they're probably struggling. And if I can be extra kind, extra generous, it might work. It might not, but it's not going to make it worse.
Got it. So
And my day will be better too because I really gave it everything I had to try to get it back in a positive frame instead of just walking around all day. Man, that guy that was here today, your whole day goes to shit because you made it that way. Though.
You choose how you show up. So from the top, we're covering the 6 elements of dignity. We're about to go to number 5. Number 1 was honoring the essential humanity of everyone we work with. Number 2, be authentic in all of our interactions without acting out. Number 3, make sure everyone has a meaningful say. Number 4, we just covered begin every interaction with positive beliefs. And number 5, commit to helping everyone get to greatness.
So, it's greatness of their choosing. It needs to be in the organization, needs to be within the frame of our values and our vision. So if our vision says we're only opening here in the Ann Arbor area. So if you came and you go, dude, I love Zingerman's. This is awesome. I want to open the Zingerman's in Phoenix. Well, that's not going to happen, but I don't have to treat you badly because I'm going to treat you with dignity. So I could go, wow, that's awesome that you want to do that. Our vision is that we only open here. I have some friends in Phoenix, like Chris Bianco. Maybe he could take you in, and maybe you could work there and grow within his organization.
Right. Or here's the series of books that I've written, spelling out
these
step by
books
step
that I wrote, and here's the Zing
how
Train.
I did it.
And while you're working here, you get a discount on Zing Train, so you could go there and learn. And then I would be glad to help you open, Eric's Exceptional Eatery in Phoenix. Because
Unstoppable.
part of what makes the Unstoppable
Eatery. Restaurant.
Part of what makes Zingerman's what it is that we're of the place. And so when people go like, I want to open it there, it's like you're missing the point.
Yeah. Reverse engineer your own rendition of Zingerman's.
But so within the organization, I mean, there's so many ways to help people get to greatness. And the typical work model is like, it's an interchangeable frontline employee. Like, who cares? Just bust the tables or just work the door or just do whatever. But it's like everybody has, back to the humanity, number 1. Everybody has dreams.
Right.
Everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to learn. Everybody wants to feel like they're making a difference. Everybody wants joy. Everybody wants hope. So if I know more what people do. So I'm looking over there. There's one employee who I know is moving, just by coincidence. She's going to Arizona to college in a month. Well, whatever. Like, she's not going to be driven to take 17 Zingerman's classes between now and 4 weeks from now. On the other hand, while I was coming over to talk to you, I chatted with another employee who just graduated from the local college, and she needs more. Like, she's like, I know I need more. Like, I got to get myself going again. So I'm talking to, like, maybe you could do this. What about that? And help her. It's just so they're both awesome. They just have different definitions of what greatness is. And you talk to Lisa Schultz,
awesome,
who's the managing partner here at the Roadhouse today. She started as a server. I don't, when she got here 19 years ago or whatever, I don't think she aspired to be a managing partner. But at some point, it shifted, and then it's super high commitment on my part and other people's part to help her get there.
Yeah, and it's weird. I feel like I love studying anthropology and the history of us, where we came from, all the way back to when we were hunter-gatherers. I really do think that the secrets or the solutions to our future is in studying how we evolved to coexist 10,000 years ago, and then recreating that in the modern day work, and like looking at like what did we need to be happy 10,000 years ago, and how do we provide those.
Well, none of this is new, dude. By the way, that'd be a good restaurant name, Hunters and Gatherers.
Yeah. Right.
Hi, welcome to Hunters and Gatherers. Can I help you? So the point is just to help everybody get to greatness, and that's tricky. Yeah, they might change their mind. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But I think the point that I'm like, when you're in a tribe of 150 people, you care when all you know is 150 people.
Yeah.
Like, you tend to care more about those people and their achievement or their progress to greatness. But when you coexist in a tribe of millions like we do today, it's hard to really care about all those tribe members because
I don't know them, so it's. I don't think of them as my tribe. I just think of everybody as a unique human being, and I want to help them.
Right.
That's what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
So if I meet your cousin and I never met them, they're not like I just bonded to them because they're human.
Right.
I don't need to be, we're both Michigan fans, so, whatever. Actually, not the biggest Michigan fan. I like Michigan fine. But the point is, I don't need to be in some group with them. I could just, if I do this well, I meet them, and greatness for them might be they're going to come in for dinner, or they're going to go to the deli and shop for olive oil. Then I want to help them have a really awesome experience. So when they go home and serve their family on Saturday, that they're putting out great cheese and that they feel great about it, then I've helped them get to greatness.
I love that.
And it's not just this transactional, like, how much can I sell them? Yeah, of course I want to sell as much as I can, but I don't want to sell them stuff that's going to make them look bad and feel bad. I get the sale, but I lose the sustainability of the relationship.
I love that. All right, and we're good to move to the sixth element.
Yeah.
All right.
We don't want to treat the sixth element like it doesn't matter.
No, we got to get to this. So create an effective application of equity.
Yeah, this is, I think, the hardest one, that's my experience of it. So I don't know exactly what it means in everyday practice to find some perfect balance point of what equity is. When I teach the new staff orientation class, which I still do, and that's a whole nother conversation, and there's an essay you'll see in the back of the beliefs book about it, I tell them the truth. I'm like, look, you guys, when I talk about equity, I'm like, it's not going to shock you. My pay is higher than yours. Like, I don't think that's surprising when you just started as a baker that, 42 years later, my pay is higher than yours. But if my pay is as much higher than yours as what you read about in some of those giant companies, that's crazy.
Right.
Too much inequity in an ecosystem, it's way out of balance, and it's not sustainable. And Russia, by the way, has the highest economic inequity, I think, in the world, and the U.S. is second.
I was going to say, we can't be too far behind.
They're neck and neck. Okay, so...
Which is extreme because
it's like, let's stop trying to be more for me. And I'm not saying don't have for me, but I want, and I think in your listenership, this is not a hard sell. But out in the world at large, there's certainly people who are extract, screw everybody else. This is just about trying to create essentially what I would say is a regenerative ecosystem, using the farming metaphor, so that everybody comes out ahead. So Like, and because we're open book management, everybody can see the numbers. I tell them the truth. Like, dude, I wish I could pay everybody. We could pay everybody double. If you know how to do it and still pay the bills, let's go.
Right. But like but if you do all these things, if you treat everybody with dignity and you empower them to have a say, to have their own, positive beliefs, to achieve greatness, all these things that we've been discussing, then they can influence their income. It might not be the same as yours, but it could be more, and everyone can win.
Yeah. And if they got a great idea, they could become a partner, and then it could be more than mine, whatever. Like, let's go.
Right. So from the top, we've covered honor the essential humanity of everyone we work with. That's number 1. Number 2, be authentic in all of the interactions without acting out. Number 3, make sure everyone has meaningful say. Number 4, begin every interaction with positive beliefs. Number 5, commit to helping everyone get to greatness. And then number 6, we just covered creating an effective application of equity. What is an application? Some package what do you mean by application of equity? Like,
well, it means, so obviously money is one thing. So paying people better, having better benefits. We have a community chest that's a fund for employees in crisis. It's confidential. There's no magic answer. I mean, we try to pay better.
Right.
I really wish we could pay everybody double. But there's also equity of other resources. So, what Paul calls social capital. So, I mean, it just happened like I don't even know I have it, but just by dint of having done what I've been doing, like I know a lot of people, and I don't go out. So it's not like I'm socially hanging out with them, but I know who they are. So, we had an employee in one of our businesses who got in a bicycle accident, and, he called the hospital, whatever, and they're like, it's 3 weeks or whatever until we can see you. And he's like, I'm in pain, So whatever, I just reached out to a surgeon that I know, and I just said, I don't want to bother you, but like, is there any, and I used to live with a surgeon. I know there's just like a restaurant, you can finagle the list,
right,
and not, to treat people inequitably, but he's in a lot of pain. And if it just comes into the clinic, he's just on the list, and so they got him in 3 days, and I know enough about how it works. It's not like somebody else suffered because of that. They probably worked a little extra, but he got taken care of. So, it's just trying to use what I have accumulated over the years to help somebody who has less than I do. There's equity of attention. So it's like, one of the fascinating things, like if you come into our places and I'm walking around with you, I'm going to try my best imperfectly to introduce you to every coworker that's there.
Yeah.
As we walk by.
Yep.
So, if we were at the door right now, I'd go, Eric, this is Sophie, and Eric, this is Olivia, even though you're here to see me. It's odd, but the public at large often will ignore them.
Yeah.
And I know this because I work the floor every night at the Roadhouse, no matter where I've been during the day, and I pour water. There's an essay in Being a Better Leader called Managing by Pouring Water. So, I don't know, half the customers know who I am, and that's one that has benefits. Half of them have no clue. They just feel bad for me that like I'm an old busboy. And I can see, like, Ann Arbor's culture is more attuned, I'm generalizing, but to like trying to treat everybody the way we're talking about. That's part of why I like living here.
Maybe it's because of your influence.
Well, it might be, and we're influenced by it, et cetera, et cetera. But there's people who come from other places, let's just say, not that it never happens with somebody who lives here, but where they just like, I'm pouring water, and it's like I don't exist. Like, they don't say thank you. They don't look at me. They just keep talking. And, I'm choosing positive beliefs, so I'm not judging them. It's just an interesting experience. Like, I don't need the ego boost. I got a lot going on. But if you're 17 and you're pouring water or you're bussing a table and people ignore you, it's kind of odd. And so but anyway, if I introduce you to the staff member and you just say like, hey, and then like completely don't pay attention to them, it's not great. So that's an inequity of attention.
So we've unpackaged the 6 elements of dignity.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing I was hoping to talk to you about while I have your attention, this idea of
Speaking of inequity of attention. Yeah.
going to the future, right? So as we look to the future, Restaurant Unstoppable's mission statement is to change the world through empowering and inspiring the restaurant industry.
Cool.
So how do we, where is the industry today? Like in terms of what, if anything, you think we could be doing better at as an industry to change the industry?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, this is the epilogue of the pamphlet, which you saw, was based on a talk that I gave at the Welcome Conference in New York last September, where they do a very nice job, by the way. But anyway, it was coming in the year where there was a lot of articles and a lot of press around how badly people are treated in restaurants. And I'm not saying we get it perfect, but hopefully we're doing better, and I think the people who are listening to your podcast also aspire to do better. And we know our industry does not have a great reputation for treating people well.
But it has come a long way.
It has, and it can come further. Yes. And so I was the whole story of how this played out in Ukraine, and again, I'm not the world expert, I'm not from Ukraine, but in the fall of 2013, the then Russian-sponsored president of Ukraine was approaching signing a deal with the European Union that would allow for much freer access for people in Ukraine who had been, of course, constricted to mostly going to former Soviet republics, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a big deal. Like if you're young and you're thinking about your whatever junior year abroad, and all of a sudden you're going to have the chance to go to Paris, London, and Rome, or Copenhagen, or whatever, instead of only going to Moscow and Minsk. It's a whole new world, man. And I mean, it's like people's hopes were high, and and then at the last minute he canceled it and signed a different deal with Putin and Russia. And this is what sparked the initial demonstrations on the Maidan Square, the central square of Kyiv, that led to the Revolution of Dignity. Anyway, the saying became that they used in the demonstration was "Ukraine is Europe," because they were like, no, we're not going back to the old way. We're looking to the future, and the future is that we are part of Europe. We're not part of Russia. And then I was like, okay, we could do that here. Restaurants are dignity. So that when people think of the restaurant industry, the first thing they think of if we do our job well is, man, I'm going in there because dignity is always what I feel. And like, we can do that. It's just your mission.
What has to change in order for us to do that?
Well, we got to fucking do this.
Yeah.
Which is easy for me to say on this podcast, but it's hard to do because we're doing it under pressure, and money's tight, and 3 people called in sick, and the delivery didn't show up, and it's a snowstorm, and we're supposed to go cater a giant party, and we can't get there,
Is there anything that you think is holding the restaurant industry back from being more dignified?
Well, I don't know that people even tried yet, and I have positive beliefs. I don't think they said, I'm not going to treat people with dignity. It's just, I never thought about it.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't opposed, but it's like saying I'm going to get in shape one day is not the same as like getting a workout regimen and a coach.
Right. I mean, one thing that I think Zingerman's does really well across all the brands is it's unapologetic about charging what the value of food is. Right.
Well, we're trying. We probably need to be higher on a lot of it, but yeah.
Right. And I think what is holding all restaurants back from charging more?
Beliefs.
Limiting beliefs.
Yeah. So there's a whole series of beliefs. The customer believes it should be cheaper. Why? Because they've seen it cheaper. I mean, it happens here. Like, we're sitting in the Roadhouse. We use Mancini macaroni to make the macaroni and cheese. It's the only farmstead pasta maker in Italy. They grow the wheat. They make the pasta. It's incredible what they do. It's all bronze die extruded. It's all dried at really low temperature for 55 hours or whatever, instead of high temperature for 5 or 6 hours. It's remarkable. Well, dude, it costs a lot more.
Right.
It tastes way better.
Yeah.
People come in and they have like, well, I got macaroni and cheese over there for blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, they're using,
where's the dignity?
I'll save the name.
Right.
But they're using some mass market food service one, or like the maybe it's slightly better, so it's the mass market Italian one, and that's fine what they want to do, but it's not apples to apples, no pun intended. So there's that belief. Then there's the belief that we have in our industry, which is we can't charge what we need to charge, because people won't pay. But
right.
Well, if you don't tell them why it's different, and you don't coach them through really these 6 elements of dignity
right.
to understand why it's different, and you don't guarantee your product. So we guarantee everything. So it's like if you bought this coffee from Chiapas and you don't like it, we're giving you your money back.
Right.
What's the risk?
I mean, I think one of my beliefs is that I think the restaurant industry has been kind of guilty of reacting to the consumer. We were taught in business school that the consumer is always right, that we look at consumer trends and we give the consumer what they want. I think that responding to the consumer, an ignorant consumer, has kind of put the restaurant industry into a corner.
Well, we've put ourselves there.
Right.
Nobody put us there.
Right.
Number one.
I think following false beliefs.
Well, so another place that's a problem is well-intended people here too. We want great food to be accessible to everybody. It's the equity piece.
Right.
The problem is you can't pay people better, buy better stuff, pay the farmers more. Even when we pay more, they're still barely making a living anyway. I live with one. We can't work ecologically sustainably, do all of these things
right,
and have it be inexpensive. Like it doesn't add up. So then we undercharge in the well-intended desire to make it more accessible. We lose money, we burn out, we quit, and then people go, you can't do it. And it's like, well, we didn't really give people the chance. And it's hard. I mean, I don't mean it's easy, but if you believe in what you're doing, and there really is a difference. If there's no difference, then just charging more is bullshit. But if there's really a difference and we're paying more and our food cost is higher to make the item and it tastes better and we believe in it,
better
why
for
not?
you, better for the environment.
We should charge. We're not helping anybody.
Right. And I think part of what needs to happen to get away from this cycle is to start having the consumer react to the restaurant and influence the consumer. Like, listen, you want to feel better, you want your community to be healthier, you want the environment to be healthier. It all starts with consumer choice. Consumer
now if we tell
purchasing.
them, if we say it to them like that,
right,
it won't go that well.
Right.
But the point is just, it's hard. I mean, there's no easy answer.
Right.
But here's the reality. If we paid everybody in the restaurants double what they make, they still wouldn't make enough.
Right.
If we paid the farmer double what they get paid, and I'm talking about like the kind of farmers we buy from and most of the people listening to this are trying to buy from, they still wouldn't make enough. So now you've doubled all your costs.
And it's still not
and it's still not enough. So, you know, if we were to go by the standards of other places that are industries that are way more profitable, whatever, a burger would be $38, you know. So it's just trying to find a way in the spirit of this that's equitable. I have no interest in gouging anybody, but you know, we're doing okay, but we're not like gazillionaires either.
Do you think eating out's a right?
Eating out is a right?
Yeah, like going out to eat is a right, a universal right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Never thought about it.
I think a lot of consumers think it is. We've gotten to this point where it's like a right to be able to go out, but I think people forget that it's a privilege.
Well, the way to make food really accessible, which is a good idea and is awesome, is to go back to we grow our own. And, you know, I'm not the world expert, but we could replace a lot of lawns and put in a lot of gardens.
Well, that's when somebody tells me there's no way.
People could eat really great food for not a lot of money.
Know.
Ron Finley in L.A., you know, is famous for this, but you know, it's like all that front. I'm not the expert, but I mean, it's just like I see what Tammy grows on her farm. Yeah. It's a lot of work, but it's very doable.
I get excited for the future. I
love the future.
Yeah, you think about what's happening with AI and automation, and some people are like, "Oh, we're going to be replaced." It's my hope that it frees up bandwidth for us to put our time and energy where it matters the most.
I know. I saw one thing, and I don't really go on social media much at all.
What's that?
I was scrolling while I was stretching after I ran the other day, and I saw this woman posted this thing and said, I don't want AI to write my poetry and do my art. I want AI to do the laundry and the dishes so I have more time to do my own.
Right.
I'm still on artisan intelligence.
Yeah, look, I think the creators are sitting in a safe place for sure in terms of
I don't know. I'm not that worried. It'll work itself out. But in the meantime, so yes, I think my belief is we can make dignity the norm. Social change, cultural change, even within our own organization takes years. This isn't like a new software that you download. It starts with me. Like I got to do this, and it's hard because I'm reactive and stressed, and I don't handle things right every time either. But it's just like all day long, every day, every fucking person that I deal with all day long. Did I do this? Did I do this? Oh shit, I screwed up. Okay, now go back, do it again. Just like anything else, like you don't learn to play guitar super well in a week. Like you don't learn to be an NBA player in a week. Like it's a lifetime of work. Anybody who's running a kitchen who's great at it, they didn't get there in a week. Like they've put a ton of work into it to get there. This is the same.
I love it, man. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, letting me know.
You're unstoppable.
I try, man. I'm doing my best. The support of people like you helps me be unstoppable. I can't do what I do without people like you, being willing to come on this platform to share your beliefs, to share your perspective, and you make it possible, man. Is there anything we haven't gotten out today that you want to get out?
Well, a couple things I'll add to the mix. So with the books, in the spirit of what we've been talking about, we're off the grid, so we're basically like farm to table for books. So I didn't enjoy my experience with the large publishing world, so we went back to doing our own. So we do all the design here. Jenny Tubbs, who's worked here like 25 years, does all the management of the production of the layout and the printing, and she does remarkable work. But we're off of Amazon. Not saying others shouldn't be on there, but I like it. Back to your question.
You were on Amazon not that long ago.
No, I mean we can't stop somebody from reselling on there. Okay. But we don't sell to them or through them. Everybody gets to do what they want, but I just, in the same way that it doesn't make sense to sell high-end food and charge what we need to charge, but the book is on Amazon for less than it cost me.
Right.
So I'd rather sell less books, but sell it in a way where I like the paper that it's printed on, and we print it locally.
You mean dignity to the paper?
Yeah.
And to the book?
Yeah. So no judgment, but so they're on Zingerman's Press or Zing Train.
Got it.
And Zing Train is our training business, which you know all about, and we can work on maybe a deal for your listeners.
Yeah, for sure.
Figure something out. And then my email is ari@zingermans.com. You can give it out, so if people have questions, they're more than welcome to reach out. And then the e-news, the easiest thing is they could email me and I'll send it back to them and they could sign up.
Yep. So that's zingtrain.com.
Yeah.
If you want to get the books.
Or zingermanspress.com. Either one.
Zingermanspress.com. You can find all the books there. There's 4 of your core Last Anarchist approach to.
Plus 8 pamphlets, plus the book I wrote about service. Yep. Which also a woman who used to live here who does translation professionally and was a customer before she moved to, now she's a mail order customer, but she did the translation, so she actually knows who we are, and it's in Spanish too. Oh, cool. So I know a lot of people where that's been helpful for bilingual workforce.
Your first book, The Last Anarchist Approach to Building a Great Business, was huge for me. I think I own 3 of the 4, and I'm going to get the 4th while I'm here today. I can't
wait.
And man, it's a great piece of work. If you haven't picked up those books, absolutely go to it.
Well, thanks, man.
It's a great foundational work and beyond. So this is where I say, man, thank you so much
for
taking the time to share your beliefs. My pleasure, man. Can't do what I do without people like you. There is no questioning, Ari. You are unstoppable. Cheers.
Thank you.